That's right. You're listening to a new episode of the Co-Main Event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. And we meet here every single week to chop up all the prominent, newsworthy, and hilarious happenings in the world of mixed martial arts. Ben, we pulled it off on Saturday night. The Co-Main Event Podcast UFC 251 Fight Party went down as scheduled over on the Patreon. And from what I understand, a good time was had by all.
From what you understand? You mean after you collected yourself, after you got obliterated on as many as 2 White Claws?
I did drink up to 2 White Claws. But also stayed hydrated.
Nearly fell asleep. They put 3 title fights on the card, and almost all of them go the full 5. You know it's going to be a rough night for your boy Chad Dundas.
Yeah. It was it got late. It was damn near midnight. Midnight, folks.
I was thinking about it afterwards. The thing that surprised me the most was the real benefit of the whole watch party was the erudite discussion from the learned and respected members of the CME listening audience. We got tips from a sommelier on there. We talked to an addictions counselor. We heard from retired fighter Daniel Downs. I mean, you got just all kinds of information just coming at you from all directions in that thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that the unmuting of some guests was going to be as big as a hit as it turned out to be. In fact, I would say I was a little bit worried about it before we actually did it, but it worked out great. It was a huge success. We're probably going to do it again, maybe even for UFC 252 if we can figure out whenever that is.
Yeah, who knows? Who could? There's no way to know when that could possibly be. But I would say I'd agree.
No way.
The unmuting of guests was the highlight for me.
Yeah,
because we got to hear other people who aren't us talk, and they ended up having a lot of interesting things to say.
Well, suffice to say, there are a lot of fun things going on over at the Patreon right now, including but not limited to, I guess, the return of pay-per-view fight parties. But also over on the Movie Club, Ben, we just kicked off watching the first season of Kingdom, the MMA series, dramatic series that used to be on the Audience Network and on DirecTV. So we're going to be doing that for the next 5 weeks. We've done the first 2 episodes of the series. We both agree they were a little bit better than we expected them to be. So I don't know, man. Things are looking up. Things are looking up over on the Patreon page.
Yeah, doing the next 2 episodes this week, Wednesday. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll be doing episodes 3 and 4 of Kingdom. That drops on Wednesday.
All right. I'm going to get my Affliction shirt back out, get some HGH in the old system, and I'll be good to go.
If you've done it already, thanks so much. And if you have not, be sure to run out and grab your copy of The Blaze. It's my latest novel. It's a mystery and thriller. I've been hearing a lot of the little co-maniacs out there are loving it. I think it's pretty good. Run out and grab it today in whatever format you like to do your reading. I would appreciate it. Remember, if you do read it and you like it, please also leave me a 5-star review over on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you like. Those reviews do help the book. They help me out. So do me a favor. Buy, read, rate, and review The Blaze wherever fine books are sold. We got music again this week from our guy Semio. That's Co-Main Event Podcast listener Alfred Larson. If you like what you hear from him on the show, you can check out more over at soundcloud.com/Semio. That's SEEMIO. 3 rounds, as usual, this week in the Co-Main Event Podcast. In round number 1, the fun-loving legend of Jorge Masvidal met the cold, hard reality of Kamaru Usman on Saturday. The results almost made me question everything I thought I believed about UFC matchmaking. And in round number 2, Alexander Volkanovski got that coveted and still announcement from Bruce Buffer. But it only made big hair Max Holloway more powerful than we could possibly imagine. And in round number 3, sure, we all had fun on Saturday night. Couple good fights, some so-so ones. I mean, it was a bummer Jose Aldo had to die. But sometimes these things happen in MMA. All that plus are you fucking kidding me and just saying stuff. But first, like we always do about this time, let's do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
The first piece of listener mail this week comes to us from JG, who writes, is it too soon to book Yuri Prochazka versus Johnny Walker for the WMF belt? And then in parentheses, it says, weirdest motherfucker belt.
And I feel like the UFC might have a lot of different contenders for various weirdest motherfucker belts. We might have to get like weirdest motherfucker above 200 pounds, below 200, something like that. Because we got some weird motherfuckers out here in the world of MMA.
Yeah, get into some old school weight classes where there's only two, lightweight and heavyweight.
Yeah. But you know what? A lot of people draw on that Johnny Walker comparison. And for a lot of reasons, not all of them good. With your, the rising champion, Yuri Prochazka here, because I think a lot of it is not only you come in as a light heavyweight, kind of a fresh face to the division, and immediately we start to realize, hey, this guy is weird and fun. We might have a good time watching this guy's rise. But also, we all kind of realize we're going to do the thing. We're going to do the thing where right away we want to fantasy matchmake this guy against John Jones just because there's nobody else really to talk about for the most part, aside from Dominic Reyes or something. And we're going to get way ahead of ourselves. And we know we're going to do it, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, Yuri Prochazka, tall guy, looks good getting off the bus, acts like an absolute wild man in there. I'm ready, man. I'm ready for the hype train. Let's get it rolling. This fight against Volkan Oezdemir, the secret of the Ooze, in the featured prelim on Saturday night at UFC 251. I mean, this thing kind of got buried by the time you get done with the marathon main card. You get through those three title fights. You get through Rose Namajunas and Jessica Andrade, and you kind of forget about this one. But I just watched it this morning. This is an absolute slobber knocker of a light heavyweight fight. An insane pace for a couple of 205-pound guys going out there swinging them bungalows at each other for a round plus almost 1 minute before Prochazka. Am I saying this guy's name right? Prochazka? Is that what we're saying now?
We'll probably go through 4 or 5 different pronunciations before we're done. So.
My assumption is I'm nailing it every single time. Yeah. He gets the very violent second round KO over Volkan Oezdemir, who frankly is a guy in the light heavyweight division who is not an easy out. Like Volkan Oezdemir, he's not a guy that we expect is going to jump up and like win the title, but he's also nothing to sneeze at. Like this is a serious contender. And so for Prochazka to go out there and just knock him out in the second round is a heck of a way to establish his presence, announce his presence in the light heavyweight division into a division, frankly, that right now needs all the spice it can get. We don't yet know what's going on with John Jones at all. We don't know what the future of that title is, but like to have a new guy, capital G guy in that division who's doing as many things as Yuri Prochazka is, I'm happy for it, man. It makes me feel a little bit less like we need to just shut the thing down.
There you go. Yeah, and I mean, to have like a 27-year-old guy show up in there and give us something to be excited about for the future, but also it seems like in the aftermath, he was kind of trying to downplay the possibility of rushing in to fight John Jones. Like he seemed aware that he might need some time to improve on some things, but he's doing some WMF type stuff out there in the first round, especially against your boy No Time. But it seemed like it was with a purpose. It seemed like he wasn't just out there just screwing around. Like he was trying to draw him out. That all seemed like a very premeditated kind of tactical thing he was going to do. And then he landed that head kick. Volkan Oezdemir, the leg got a little stinky, and you could see the realization where he's like, okay, here we go. Time to put this guy away. And that was like eyes open, laying on the floor, bad knockout there too.
Yeah. Early on, whenever Prochazka was trying to do his showboating, he was getting tagged a little bit by Volkan Oezdemir, although it didn't seem to perturb him too much on many occasions. He did get wobbled a couple of times, but he was opening himself up to some shots, but then he's able obviously to come back and get the big knockout in the second round. So it all worked out for him. I'm just wondering, like, if you've got that style, the WMF style, how far can you reasonably expect it to take you, even in this division that is so shallow? And if you're John Jones and you're sitting at home, obviously you're not sure what your contract status with the UFC is going to be. You're not sure if they're going to come across with the kind of money you want, but are you kind of licking your chops about a guy who fights like that, has this kind of weird style? Does that give John Jones problems, or do you think it just opens up more opportunities for John Jones to do John Jones stuff?
I'm not prepared to say that I saw anything that gives John Jones problems. Not yet, anyway. But, let's maybe use the opportunity if John Jones is going to take some personal time and see if he can work out a better financial deal for himself with the UFC. Maybe let's use that opportunity to not rush anything here. Slow play it a little bit. Let's just see how things develop on their own.
You can only slow play guys in this division so long, but I agree with you.
True.
Next question this week comes to us from Ben Gabriel, who writes, as Chad accurately pointed out when he quote tweeted some handsome son of a bitch's tweet, I believe that was Ben Gabriel.
Yeah, that'd be Ben Gabriel.
Jorge Masvidal is one of the two main faces of the new UFC 4 video game. So how you not paying that man his money? Paraphrase from original. Also, it's a good damn trailer for a fighting video game. So I've watched it a couple times. While Usman has some weird Cobra Temple home base, Masvidal seems to have his actual life story as a feature of the game, including the late Kimbo Slice. Are you fucking kidding me? Ben, what'd you think of this? What'd you think of the rollout of the new UFC 4 video game?
I think we mean Israel Adesanya, not Usman, has some weird Cobra Temple home base thing going on. But that is interesting because you see the thing of like Jorge Masvidal as being the street fighter, backyard fighter kind of guy. It's a nice touch that they have like the chain link set up to look like an octagon.
Yeah,
like that's kind of a cool thing. But like since that is true to his real life, then when you flash over to Israel Adesanya, like training at some snake cult temple or something as his beginning, you're like, wait a minute. So we're not supposed to take all this literally? Like some of it is fictional and some of it is actually real. Like, it does get a little bit confusing, but it is a good trailer, and it made you a little bit excited about the game. I mean, we talked a little bit about how it's hard to make a good MMA video game, but you see some of this stuff, some of the other touches that they might be putting in there, and you think, okay, at least it looks cool so far. But it's true. Like if you have this guy as the cover dude on your video game, it is hard to then turn around and be like, no, he doesn't deserve more money.
Yeah.
Like, how do those things go together?
Speaking of reality versus fiction, you also get Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua there right at the end of the trailer as, I believe, playable characters in this thing.
Pre-order, I think you get them as playable characters. Somebody, I don't know if it was John Nash or somebody on Twitter mentioning, like, I wonder what those guys got as their like a likeness rights fee in order to be in the game, because
the boxers,
they were just you didn't just go to those guys and be like, hey, what's up, how about we put you in this video game? And they're like, I would love to be in a video game. That's amazing. Like, could I have a free copy? Could I have 2 free copies? Like, you paid those guys something. Meanwhile, like for a lot of other people, like that was a big sticking point really early on in UFC's negotiations with fighters. John Fitch, you remember him? The moment he blanched at the idea of signing away his likeness rights forever, the UFC cut him, and then kind of tried to go scorched earth on the whole gym there until they relented on it. So that is interesting. It would be interesting to know what the difference is there between how the boxers are being treated versus how the actual MMA fighters of the UFC are being treated.
Next question this week comes to us from Gorgeous George Wallace. So you think that's the former governor of Alabama?
I assume it's his alter ego.
Yeah. Like when he wrestles on the weekends.
Right.
He becomes Gorgeous George Wallace. He writes, is Amanda Ribas the female version of Junior Dos Santos? She stops fools, loves life, and cuts adorable interviews. So, of course, Ben, we saw Amanda Ribas go out there in the curtain jerker of UFC 251, the pay-per-view broadcast, in her women's flyweight fight, and did what the odds makers thought she would do to Paige Van Zant and wins by first round armbar. Sends Paige Van Zant, in theory, out to test free agency on the heels of this loss. For you, is this more about establishing Amanda Ribas, who now has a couple of wins over capital G girls in that division? She's got Mackenzie Dern. She's got Paige Van Zant. She's the hype squasher out there at that weight class. But is this matchup to you more about kind of trying to establish Amanda Ribas as a thing, or is this more just about sending Paige Van Zant out the door on the heels of an ugly L like the UFC likes to do?
I mean, it could be both. It can be two things. Especially for the UFC, you might think you're really serving your own purposes if you make sure that it is two things. That you make sure you send Paige Van Zant out on a pretty one-sided loss where she was never really super competitive in the fight. And then also you use whatever hype you think that Paige Van Zant can still confer upon somebody, and you give it to Amanda Ribas, who's actually sticking around and who is much earlier on in her career with the UFC and is probably making a lot less money than whatever Paige Van Zant's going to want to re-sign. So I think the UFC probably sees it as a twofer, and that's it. As far as the Gorgeous George Wallace's comparison to like a female version of Junior Dos Santos, do we know if Amanda Ribas has ever sold ice creams?
Yeah, that's a good question. What is her response to the television ratings of her fight? And is it, I'm famous? Because that's
If she ever finds herself booed by a crowd after a really strong effort, might she ask why they do that?
it's possible. I guess what we're saying is we need to see more.
We do. But I'm interested to see more. You know me, go out there submitting people, armbar and fools, getting me to jump up off the couch and shout jujitsu. What? Like I'm already into it. You don't have to work that hard to get me behind a tactic like that. So let's see some more. Let's see where it goes.
Next question this week comes to us from Kip Pennington, who writes, 3 title fights on one card. Sounds good on paper, right? Only if you don't mind going to bed at the ass crack of dawn. UFC 245 contained 3 title fights, which lasted 14 rounds, 4 minutes, 10 seconds. I believe he means UFC 251 here. He is talking about Usman's TKO over Colby Covington, right. 1:55 a.m. Eastern time. UFC 251 had 14 rounds, 3 minutes, and 24 seconds of title fights. Usman's decision over Masvidal, 1:58 a.m. Eastern time. Regardless of one's true time zone, this is a bit painful, no? Discourse, if you would, fine lads. Now, we talked about this in the lead up to UFC 251 with the 3 5-round fights finishing off the main card there. We asked the question if this was going to be a late night, and if by the time it was all said and done with these 3 fights, if we had set ourselves up in some ways for disappointment. And it did get late. It did seem to drag on, and I know we will talk about the main event coming up more in round number 1, but that was, that fight also went a little bit like we thought it would, and maybe is a little bit of a disappointment for people who wanted to see Jorge Masvidal go out in there and do more of his stuff. But, man, you stack these fights 3 title fights deep, and it does feel like you are asking for just a marathon out of a pay-per-view main card.
Yeah, but then if I were the UFC, I heard people complaining about how late the fight card went, I would probably be going, hey, what do you assholes want? Do you want stacked cards with a bunch of title fights? Because you complained if we just put 1 title fight on there and it's the only fight anybody cares about, and the rest of them are just kind of prelim filler. Then we hear a bunch of bullshit from it where everybody's mad about that. And then we give you 3 title fights for the same cost on 1 pay-per-view, and then you complain that it takes too long. Yeah. Like I can see both sides. Like, I'm not really going to complain about a really strong lineup like that, because value for your money wise, this is one of the better pay-per-views that we've seen in a long time. And a lot of that had to do with the backlog of international fighters and title fights that we couldn't see because of the struggle to get restarted during the pandemic and everything. And granted, it's easier to sit here in the one true time zone where, okay, it goes till midnight and you're like, okay, I'm 40. Midnight is not the same hour that it used to be when I was 25. It's somehow midnight takes place at 4 a.m. at my age. So I it's not great. It is tougher for those poor East Coast bastards. And I'm sure like people in Ireland and England are going to complain they hear us expressing sympathy for anyone on this side of the Atlantic. But I can understand how when I lived in New York City, I remember watching those pay-per-views, and it's like, man, the main card starts at 10 p.m. Like, starts? Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot of people were making fun of me over on the live stream that I was starting to get tired by the time the main event rolled around. I just wanted to know where those people were when my 5-year-old woke me up at 5:30 in the morning the next day. So, pick your poison. I assume
they were at the club.
Yes, they were probably still at the club. That time.
Popping bottles.
This next question comes to us from David Lotta Ray, who writes, man, you think it sucks to fight in the middle of the night in Abu Dhabi. Imagine fighting on the undercard in the middle of the night, in the middle of the week in Abu Dhabi. That has to suck even more. I feel ya, Modestus Bukauskas and Andreas Michalidis. Nailed it, I'm sure.
100% he put those in there just to make you say those names.
I don't even know if those are real fighters. But we're going to say it.
It's real guys on the prelims.
As far as the main event goes, is anyone else enjoying the irony of 2 guys being pitted against each other who are both cutting promos, complaining that they can't make a name for themselves by beating up guys without names? Nice work, UFC matchmakers. Anyway, what are your thoughts on Dan Ige versus Calvin Kattar? So this one's coming up on Wednesday, right, Ben?
Yeah.
We're doing like a midweek thing. Yep. Also over there at this one's at the Flash Forum in Abu Dhabi. Over there on Yas Island. That's the thing they built, is the Flash Forum. Yep. That's what we're calling it. So wait.
That's what's called.
It's Yaz Island, it's Fight Island, and it's the Flash Forum.
Yep, correct.
All those things are true.
Everything. You can call it 3 or 4 more things on top of that if you want to. Nothing means anything anymore.
I'll also call it UFC on ESPN Cater versus Ige and UFC on ESPN 13. How's that?
Sure. Why not?
Get your Wednesday night card here. Calvin Cater versus Dan Ige in the main event. Tim Elliott versus Ryan Benoit. Jimmy Rivera versus Cody Stamen. Molly McCann versus Talia Santos. And Abdul Razak Hassan, nailed it, versus Monir Lazay. Lazay, nailed it. Who's watching this on Wednesday night? Who's doing this?
People who are glad there's some sports on. Just throw that stuff on ESPN, and some people will just be like, "Oh shit, sports! How about that? I haven't seen that in a while." And yeah, I mean this is not. There's not a whole lot going on. I mean, Calvin Cutter versus Dan Ige, like yeah, I'll watch that. That's a good fight. Tim Elliott versus Ryan Benoit, I'll watch that too. I mean, Jimmy Rivera, he's an exciting, fun guy to watch. So sure, but pretty much the entire prelim card, which I believe is also on ESPN here. If you have anything else that you need to do and you're thinking like, oh, I don't know though, maybe I should like put these errands off to go to make sure I'm in my seat to watch these live and sit through the commercials. No, don't do it. Get the errands done. Let the DVR take care of this one. I feel like you could just kind of settle in for the last 2 or 3 fights here and you'd be okay.
Well, on the prelim card, this is the fight where Jared Gordon is fighting Chris Fishgold. And didn't Jared Gordon's entire corner crew test positive for COVID-19?
Yes.
So all around good guy Paul Felder is going to jump out from the broadcast booth and help corner Jared Gordon in this fight?
Yeah. See, so his entire team tests positive, but not him.
Not him. Nope. Kind of like Jorge Masvidal. Everyone else over there at ATT in Florida tests positive, but he's fine. Skates right through, gets his welterweight title fight.
Well, I mean, interesting times that we're living in right now. And interesting times to just, if you're a UFC comment, we're not that far off from John Anik having to jump out there and put some Vaseline on somebody's cut and put a Q-tip in there just because everybody got to maybe do 2 or 3 jobs before this whole thing's over.
Well, with the mustache, though, I would find John Anik almost believable as a UFC cut man.
That's more of a referee's mustache, I think.
It's just, you know what? The mustache commands so much respect. I would believe whatever he said he was. If he says he's a cut man, I'm not going to question him. It
really confers a sense of authority. It's like that thing what John C. Reilly said when he was filming Talladega Nights and he had the mustache and that he pulled up to the scene of like there was a fender bender in his neighborhood and everybody they got out of their cars and he realized they were all suddenly looking at him for what to do next. And he was like, oh, it's the mustache. People see the mustache, they think you must be in charge.
Yeah, no, it works. I like it. In any case, that's going to do it for listener mail this week. If you have questions, comments, concerns that you want to air to the podcast in future weeks, you know how to do it. You go to the website, comainevent.com, and click the link in the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. While you're there, go ahead and sign up for the Breakfast of Champions newsletter. That comes out every Friday morning to catch you up on the news and notes that we miss on all the days that we're not recording the podcast. Stuff always happens. News always breaks. The newsletter itself is short. It's informative. We would love to tell you it's funny. And if you don't like it, it's really easy to unsubscribe. As for right now, though, we're going to go ahead and get started with round number 1. What mic setup are you using over there? What mic are you using?
My usual mic.
Is it the Yeti?
No, the Yeti has been. I've been plugging it in, but then it doesn't pick anything up. When I'm wearing this thing that has this guy, it picks it up no matter what else you plug in there.
So you're just using the mic on your headphones?
Yeah. I have been just using the mic on my headphones like for weeks. Even when I had the Yeti, it was only picking up this.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Plus, you're remarkably hands-free over there.
Well, and I had to set up a webcam because the camera on my computer just doesn't work anymore. So now I got the webcam, got this thing. Just I can do whatever I want with my hands.
It's amazing.
Hard hands. There we go.
Oh, no, that's great. That's great.
Okay.
All right, round number 1. Ready for this?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Well, Ben, Jorge Masvidal jumps in on 6 days' notice in the main event of UFC 251, gets that welterweight title shot we know he's been thinking about against Kamaru Usman. Made for a hell of a story. Everyone was very excited. And then we get to the actual fight. And just as we thought might happen, Kamaru Usman is able to go out there and do all of his stuff against a version of Jorge Masvidal who had been training, but maybe wasn't getting ready for this fight, maybe hadn't been after it with the kind of urgency that you would have when you were in an actual fight camp. And so we end up getting a rather lopsided unanimous decision, 50-45 times 2, 49-46 on one judge's scorecard, but a victory nonetheless for Kamaru Usman. I don't think it helped matters that it comes on the heels of a very long pay-per-view card where Peter Yan ended up finishing Jose Aldo, midway through the final round. Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway go to a split decision. So you get 3 very long fights here right at the end of this thing. Were you disappointed by this fight? What was your feeling heading out of UFC 251? Did this thing live up to your expectations, or was it a little bit of a letdown?
Well, to finish this way, and especially for those people for whom it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, you can see how it would be probably the most predictable and least interesting possible way for this fight to have gone. Because Kamaru Usman comes out there and does the Kamaru Usman stuff to Jorge Masvidal. And I don't blame him. I mean, let's put that out there right there. Like, I'm not criticizing the guy's game plan, because was it fun to watch? No, it was not super fun to watch. But if I were in his shoes, would I have done anything differently? No. What are you going to do? You're going to go out there and you're going to play around with Jorge Masvidal? You're going to get away from your strengths against a guy like Jorge Masvidal? That is how you get kneed upside your damn head, Chad. That's not what you want to do.
Right. I think you got to give Jorge Masvidal credit for being the consummate showman out there. Every time he did get some opportunities on the feet, he was trying to crack. He was trying to do the thing that he knew everyone wanted to see from him. I guess he was also trying to do the thing that gave him the best chance to win the fight. We had talked about leading up whether or not Jorge Masvidal wanted to take some home run swings here to try to get Kamaru Usman out of there early, just knowing everything that we knew about the lead up to this fight and what both these guys were going to try to do in there. It seemed like he did try to do that. He did try to, make the most of what he could do on the feet. But of course, you get 5, 10, 15 minutes into this thing, he just didn't have the explosive power left anymore. He just didn't have the gas in the tank, and it ultimately becomes the Kamaru Usman show. Let's talk first a little bit about Usman, and then we can talk some more about Jorge Masvidal. Caught a lot of flack on Twitter after this, which I guess is expected. You kind of knew it was going to happen if he went out there and had his fight against fan favorite Jorge Masvidal. But he was, he's getting blasted for being boring. He's getting blasted for not being the BMF. He might be the welterweight champ, but he's not the BMF. He went out there and fought his fight, as you said, a smart fight. And yet, I don't necessarily know if we do him any favors coming out of this thing, even with the win. Did this win at all in front of what we assume is a lot of eyeballs? The UFC was making a lot of noise about how this was going to be a big selling pay-per-view. But did Kamaru Usman do anything for himself as welterweight champion here to make himself seem like a guy people want to watch?
Not really, but I think maybe he just has to lean into that and accept that for what it is. Because if that's going to be your go-to move when you feel like you were really threatened with somebody who you got to play it smart and safe the whole way through. You can't afford to take a whole bunch of chances. I mean, he had a much more exciting fight against Colby Covington, but there was a guy who he clearly respected the guy's wrestling more and felt like, I can't just rely on being able to do that, but I'm also not worried about anything this guy brings on the feet. And so it made for a more exciting matchup. And you could argue that to some extent, maybe that's something that we'll just see from him going forward, is a kind of styles make fights approach, where when he fights somebody like that, then we'll see a different approach from him. But when he fights somebody who he thinks, okay, this guy's dangerous on the feet, but he can't hang with my wrestling ability, and I control the clinch game and everything, then it makes sense. If all your ability to make money and be on top is dependent on you winning them all, you're not like some of the other guys like Jorge Masvidal, who's getting by on more style points and things like that, then of course you're going to go out there and you're going to do whatever gives you the best chance to win, to stay champion, and to keep making that championship money. I mean, I am curious to see how it goes against somebody else, somebody like Gilbert Burns, who has a history with Kamaru Usman in the gym. They're former training partners, so you know a little bit more about what the guy brings, and you know more about how the matchup might actually play out, because both guys have been in there and sparred with each other. But against Jorge Masvidal, I guess it's totally fair for people to be like, look, this was your chance where you could have been the guy to move forward and be able to sell these pay-per-views on your own. Because that's kind of the knock on Usman, right? He's a champion at 170, but he needs somebody else to be the guy who brings in the eyeballs, because he's not really bringing it. And this is not going to change that. Not a whole lot of people came out of this and went like, when is Kamaru Usman fighting next? I gotta be there. Why don't you just hold on to my credit card until then? Because it's a given that I want to watch. That didn't happen for him. But it's better than messing around and losing your title, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess you got to give him that. And again, like, I don't necessarily know that a ton of the criticism is warranted. I mean, I guess if you're a Jorge Masvidal fan and you showed up wanting to see an exciting, Diaz style fight like he had his last time out, you would probably be disappointed. But Kamaru Usman just had a pretty exciting fight against Colby Covington the last time out. This time, not so much. But I guess, matchup styles make fights, and if you have the actual fights, if you're going to have legitimate competition in this sport, like, sometimes you're going to get fights that aren't that exciting. Sometimes you're going to get fights that just don't live up to your expectations. It'll be interesting, I think, to see if he does get Gilbert Burns next, also what he does with a guy who's dangerous on the ground, because Burns obviously has legit Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills, so it might not be the same game plan as he would have for a guy like Jorge Masvidal.
If you were a fan of foot stomps, this was the fight for you.
Mid-90s Pacific Northwest fighting style coming back. Foot stomps going to be the new big thing.
Like, straight out of Team Quest shit. Like, if you're a mark for foot stomps, this was the fight you've been waiting for all year.
And I kind of am. Really, so there you are.
Yeah. You think Jorge Masvidal's walking around with some swollen ass feet right now?
I bet they're not feeling great. I bet they're not feeling great, to be honest with you.
This is when you want to have like a good pair of really broken in flip flops.
Yeah.
This post fight, you don't want to be trying to squeeze those bad boys in some stiff loafers or anything.
Yeah, no, something comfortable. You want to be comfortable for this. All right, let's talk a little bit about Jorge Masvidal here. I always think about this whenever we have these superstar guys like Jorge Masvidal show up on the scene in MMA. Obviously, he's been around for a long time, but only just recently ascended to the heights of superstar status. If you are kind of like a casual person who became aware of Jorge Masvidal because of the Nate Diaz fight, the BMF title, all that stuff, and then you followed him into this fight with Kamaru Usman only to see him get wrestled basically to death and lose via unanimous decision, I wonder how you feel. Do you feel it's almost similar to me in feeling like Conor McGregor? Like, if you were a person who found out about Conor McGregor leading up to the Floyd Mayweather fight, and you thought he was cheeky and funny, and then you saw him get beat by Floyd Mayweather, and then you immediately turn around and follow him back to the UFC, and you see him get beat again by Khabib Nurmagomedov, do you start to be like, man, do these UFC star guys win? Like, who are these guys that I'm trying to follow in this sport? Like, I showed up to watch Jorge Masvidal and he just gets obliterated in a not very exciting fight. I wonder if that is a concern at all here.
Yeah, but I don't think that demographic is likely to come away from that really blaming Jorge Masvidal too much for that. I think that they'll still be far more easily sold on, hey, here's what Jorge Masvidal is doing next, and they would be on, here's what Kamaru Usman is doing next.
Right.
So I think, depending on whatever matchup you decide to book Jorge Masvidal in, I think you can still get those people potentially excited about it, even if it's not for a UFC title or anything. Far more so than for Usman versus Burns. I mean, that's still going to be a fight for the hardcores and for the people who are just going to watch every single title fight that the UFC puts on, regardless. I think that we kind of predicted this beforehand, that if Masvidal went out there and lost a Kamaru Usman kind of fight, that he could kind of shrug his shoulders and be like, hey, 6 days notice, and I'm still the BMF champ, because that was not a BMF performance from that guy. And I'm still out here. I'll put the 3-piece in a soda on whoever you want next. And people will be like, yeah, okay, we're still into it. And I think that's the case. I think that's the reality we're sitting here dealing with on Monday afternoon.
Once again, it draws like some differences for me between in the matchmaking style of the UFC and what you might get in boxing, because obviously when everyone's under the same umbrella, you have a much more structured title picture. And we all wanted to see Jorge Masvidal fight for the welterweight title. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Like, the guy has captured our attention over the last couple of years. He's on this 3-fight win streak. We wanted to see him come out there and fight for the title. And yet the fact that this matchup played out exactly like we might have expected it to play out, that basically it was a Kamaru Usman steamroller, that he runs all over Jorge Masvidal here en route to this 5-round unanimous decision. I watched it, and in the end, I was like, man, do we really want to see Jorge Masvidal in these kind of fights? Like, I understand we had to do this one kind of because it was for the title. Obviously, it was short notice replacement, but this is the UFC 251 main event they wanted in the first place. Coming out of it, I was like, what do I want from Jorge Masvidal? Do I want to see him fight for titles and like be this relevant guy in this division, even though the fights might not turn out to be all that exciting? Or do I basically just want to see him have fun scraps?
Well, I think now, once we've seen what happens in the title fight with Kamaru Usman, now it's a lot easier to feel good about, okay, let's relax and have some fun scraps.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like he's being held back from anything. And I also, I know people in the aftermath of this fight will look at it and go, okay, but what if he had a full training camp? What if he had full 6 weeks to prepare just for Kamaru Usman? And I'm not saying that makes no difference, because obviously, 6 weeks is going to make a big difference in your preparation than 6 days. And especially cardio-wise, you mentioned down the stretch, there seemed like there were a couple of situations where there might have been opportunities, but he just didn't have the pop anymore. And that, I'm sure, is probably due to not just having that fight-shaped kind of cardio that you rely on. But I also don't think that the outcome of this fight really changes if you give Jorge Masvidal a 6-week training camp. Right. I think maybe it's a little more competitive. Maybe he has a little more chance to get in it later in the fight. But I think you probably end up with a very similar kind of fight and a very similar outcome in the end, even if Masvidal gets a full training camp. So at this point, we saw it. We saw how it would go. I'm fine with us moving into fun fight territory for Jorge Masvidal. We could have some actual literal fun with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What happens now for Jorge Masvidal? What role do we want for him? What does he do next coming off this loss? Like, clearly, as you said, like, I don't think this hurts his popularity. I don't necessarily know it hurts his standing in the division. But that said, you look around, he says he doesn't want Colby Covington next, but what's the proper move here for matchmakers, for the UFC, and for Jorge Masvidal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how literally to take his comment that he doesn't want Jorge, or he doesn't want Colby Covington next, because I think it would probably be easiest to generate interest in that one. And then if you look at what your other options are, the way I see it, there's only 2 other options beside Colby Covington. One is Leon Edwards, because we've got the 3-piece in the soda thing. If Gilbert Burns is going to fight for the title, Leon Edwards has to do something, right? He was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley, but after Woodley got beat by Burns, now that one has a lot less to gain for Leon Edwards. They had that backstage encounter. You could easily imagine that being repurposed into endless hype reel stuff for the UFC, and you go ahead and you make that fight. It's still, for Jorge Masvidal, you'd look at it and you'd be like, okay, here's a fight against a dude who is a tough guy to fight, but who nobody really knows. And so there's more downside probably than upside. And then the only other third opportunity is another fight with Nate Diaz, which is the one Jorge Masvidal has seemed the most open to. And I also feel like we saw it. We saw how that one would go. It'd probably be a fun fight to watch again, just stylistically, the way those two guys match up. But it also feels like pretty low stakes at this point. Like we're just beating each other up just because it's something to do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. All right, let's go ahead and do Are You Fucking Kidding Me, Ben? And then we can move on to round number 2. Ben, what's your Are You Fucking Kidding Me this week?
Well, I mentioned a little bit when we were doing our live watch party, but on the prelims here, I know you might not have seen this one live because you were too busy getting your shark shirt on and cracking open the pallet of White Claws that you keep in the shed out back. But Leonardo Santos beaten up Roman Bogotov here in this prelim fight, lightweight bout, and looked like he's going to put him away at one point. To his credit, Bogotov hangs tough in this fight. Santos maybe kind of blew his load a little bit there, was kind of tired out. You're heading into a close fight in the third, and then all hell just breaks loose. 3 Chad, 3 fouls from Roman Bogatov in the 3rd round alone. That just happens to be the exact number of that Leonardo Santos landed in the 3rd round. He landed as many fouls, as many illegal blows as Leonardo Santos landed significant blows. And my "are you fucking kidding me" here is kind of two-pronged. One is to Roman Bogatov. Are you fucking kidding me? Do you not know the rules of mixed martial arts? He hits him in the groin twice, and then he's extremely lucky to get away without any consequences for his actions whatsoever after Marc Goddard pulls him aside for the second one and strongly warns him that if he does not stop committing fouls, he may lose a point. So that's my second "are you fucking kidding me." Wow, it took that much. We still weren't ready to take a point from the guy after 2 groin strikes in 1 round. Imagine if you could, like, the advantage you get over somebody if you knew you could go in there and I get to hit him in the groin twice, suffer no consequences other than arrest and a little bit of a talking to. Marc Goddard has a polite British accent too, so it's not even really like the talking to is that bad. It's almost enjoyable to have that guy give you a stern talking to. But then right after that, right after the restart, basically, he goes and knees him in the head while he's down. And then Marc Goddard, here's the part where it really saves it for me. He pulls him aside immediately, looks at Bogatov and says, "Like, what are you thinking? What are you even doing out here right now?" Then says, "Screw it, taking 2 points from you." Are you fucking kidding me? Sometimes Chad Dundasso just goes wrong.
You fucking kidding me?
Fucking kidding me?
I mean, I don't agree with that sentiment, but okay on the rest of it.
There's such a thing as too much of a good thing.
No, not when it comes to Dundasso, my friend. Ben, we talked about this in the opening of the show in listener mail, but I just wanted to read Dana White's comments from the UFC 251 post-fight press conference when he was asked about Paige Van Zandt. Of course, this being her last fight on her UFC contract. She says she wants to test free agency after this, go out and see what she's worth. Here's what Dana White had to say. "I like Paige, but it's like Curtis Blades. When Blades fought last, when you talk all that stuff, I'm not being paid enough and fighting inconsistently, one time in the last year, injuries, and then you got smoked in the first round of the fight. She should definitely test free agency." Are you fucking kidding me? Dude, we know you did this on purpose. We are aware of what your game is here when someone wants to test free agency at the end of their contract. You do this on purpose. You set them up with a fight where they're going to get killed, and then you show up at the press conference and you talk about how to talk about money, and then you got smoked. Come on, man. Are you fucking kidding me? We know you did this. Amanda Ribas was like a plus 700 favorite or some shit headed into this fight. You can't show up to the post-fight press conference and, scold Paige Van Zandt like she talked a bunch of shit about money and then she got smoked. You fucking kidding me?
Also, did he say it's like Curtis Blades? Because maybe my memory is a little hazy after all that proper 12 on fight night, but Curtis Blades won. He won the main event in his fight.
But it wasn't exciting, right? Wasn't he getting knocked that it wasn't the most exciting thing in the world?
So if you have anything to say about money, you can't then turn around and lose a fight.
Yep.
And if you win, it has to be spectacular.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. All right. Just
are you
making sure I understand. I'm kidding me.
All right, that's going to do it for round number 1. We'll be right back with round number 2. You got an intro in you for round number 2 for Holloway versus Volkanovski?
I got an intro. I got an intro for your ass, Chad Dennis.
Jesus Christ. All right, well, whenever you're ready, give me that intro for my ass.
For your ass. Chad, so you were there watching with me when we watched this UFC 251 featherweight title fight. And by there, I mean on a computer screen, since you and I are friends who have not actually seen each other in person in months now. But right after this fight was over and it was announced as a split decision victory for Alexander Volkanovski, I felt like, you know what, Max Holloway won that fight. I felt like the judges did him wrong in that fight. Then today, Monday, I went back, turned the sound off, watched the fight from start to finish, scoring rounds as I went. And I got to say, upon rewatch, with no commentary, laser focused this time, not, beer in one hand and a pirate patch over my eye and trying to talk to you and a bunch of other jerks on the UFC 251 live watch party, but really laser focused on the action. I got to say, I scored it for Alexander Volkanovski.
Okay. All right. Tell me how you got there. How did you,
okay.
how did you get to that score?
And still, even scoring it for Alexander Volkanovski, I still had to feel for Max Holloway, and I'll tell you why. Because you score the first 2 rounds, right? Max Holloway gets those rounds. It's not really in dispute. It's not like he's absolutely blowing Alexander Volkanovski away, but he is controlling the action in both those rounds. He's really controlling the distance very well in both those rounds. And both, in the first and the second, he ends both rounds in like the final 10 seconds each time by rocking Alexander Volkanovski with a strike that drops him to a knee. First round, he hits that head kick right behind the ear, drops Volkanovski. Doesn't drop him like flat or anything, but knocks him down to a knee. And clearly, like the most significant strike of the round so far. He does it again in the second round where he lands a right hand uppercut, drops him to a knee. And Volkanovski, you could tell going back to the second round, you could see the frustration on his face where he knows, like, okay, I'm probably down 2 rounds done. He comes back in there in the third. Very close round in the third. Really hard to say, what you want to do with that in the third. Honestly, I thought beforehand that the third was going to be the most pivotal round. Like, that's the one people are going to disagree on. That some people are going to have that one for Holloway, some for Volkanovski, and how you score that one is going to determine who you think won the fight. And really, when I went back and watched it, it was the fourth round that I found to be the hardest to score, because Volkanovski gets a takedown, but he doesn't, he gets a couple takedowns in this fight, but he's never able to really do anything with it. Especially if you look at the scoring criteria in the unified rules, they kind of explicitly tell you, like, if a guy gets a takedown, but he can't advance position, doesn't land any strikes, it doesn't lead to anything, then that shouldn't really count for very much. And both the times that he gets takedowns earlier in the fight against Max Holloway, Holloway is right back up. Volkanovski doesn't even get a chance to throw a strike, much less land one. Doesn't get a chance to try to change the position. He's just solely focused on holding Holloway down, and he can't do it. Holloway is right back up there. And Volkanovski is landing more total strikes when you look at the stats, but when you're actually watching it in real time, like not paying attention to the stats, just looking at who's landing clean, who's landing effectively, it seems so even there. And I like the earlier rounds, it just comes down to, you get into the final 30 seconds of these rounds and you're going, this seems like still anybody's round. And it's kind of who makes a more emphatic point. But the thing that most impressed me going back and watching it this time was, you can tell Volkanovski after the first 2, he realizes he's having problems with the distance, that Max Holloway has a really good plan this time for keeping him where he wants him. He's not allowing Volkanovski to establish the same leg kicking game that he did in the first one. Like, Holloway is doing a better job earlier on of establishing the leg kicks. And he's catching Volkanovski in these ranges where Volkanovski's trying to get in closer to where he wants to be. And Holloway keeps catching him in that mid-range where he'll get him kind of stopped there. And that's where he's landing that uppercut. He's landing knees to the body there. And Volkanovski's being frustrated by it. But he figures it out. He really does. Like rounds 3, 4, 5, he really starts using that left hand. He's using it as a jab and as a left hook. He even starts working it to the body too. But that's the punch that makes all the difference in this fight. Like, the reason Alexander Volkanovski still has a UFC title around his waist is because of the work he does with that left hand, especially the hook. That's what he's using both as an entry and to hurt Max Holloway, and hurt him in a way where Holloway can't really get him back afterwards. And it's really, honestly, more impressive when I go back and watch it to see Alexander Volkanovski have trouble in the first 2 rounds. You can see it on his face. He knows it. He knows that he's losing this fight. And he finds a way to get back in it and wins it.
Yeah, fair enough. Like I
hashtag champ shit only.
I knew it was a close fight when we watched it. I wasn't going to cry robbery about it. I guess as we watched it live, I did think that Holloway won. I thought that he was going to get the decision, but it was close enough that despite the fact that it's a real tough loss for Max Holloway, and I don't know exactly what happens with him now. We can talk about that in a couple minutes. It was close enough that I wasn't really going to cry robbery either way. Do you think that this gets us back to a discussion about how these fights are scored and about the 10-point must system and whether or not it is a, kind of a blunt tool to score fights that can be as nuanced and as diverse as MMA fights? Just because, the rounds that Max Holloway won were pretty clear-cut rounds for Max Holloway. And he arguably, I think, did more damage to Alexander Volkanovski in those rounds. And the rounds that Volkanovski won were much closer, where he would, as you said, he's doing good work with the left hand and kind of pull him out in the last minute, last 30 seconds. In the system we have now, those are scored as the same thing. Like on the scorecard, there's literally zero difference between the rounds won by Max Holloway and the rounds won by Alexander Volkanovski. But should there be? Should there be a difference if one round is really, really clear-cut and lopsided and one round is very close but sort of edges in the direction of Volkanovski?
Yeah, well, see, that's the question I was asking myself as I scored it is, can I talk myself into either of those first two rounds being a 10-8 for Max Holloway? And I couldn't quite get there just because, you drop the guy to one knee, and if that's it, if that's the one thing that you're saying makes it a 10-8, I don't know. I just don't know if that's enough. And yet you're right. And that, I think, is one of the things that contributed to the feeling that Max Holloway should have won, is because the rounds he won by much clearer margin. Alexander Volkanovski did not win any round as clearly as Max Holloway won both rounds 1 and 2. And so that's what you come away from. You go like, okay, if you win 3 rounds by just razor thin margins in each one, even the 5th round, the one that I think was probably Volkanovski's clearest round, it's not like he's really blowing Max Holloway away at any point. And honestly, the thing that might have really helped him out is that Max Holloway goes for a kind of throw there, like in the last 10 or 15 seconds. It seems like thinking, I know this round is close. Maybe I want to end up on top with a takedown of my own here, and maybe that'll help solidify it for me. And instead, Volkanovski ends up on top and ends the fight landing his only ground strikes of the entire fight. Like that's the only way he gets it, is when Holloway himself tries a takedown and it doesn't work, and that might clinch it for him there. But even that, like all those rounds are so close, whereas the 2 first ones for Holloway, you walk back to the corner after those, and I don't think anybody had too much doubt in those rounds. So it does feel a little bit wrong to have him win by clear margins, Volkanovski win by just razor thin, arguable margins in every single other one, and Volkanovski goes home with a title. But then it's like, if you give Max Holloway a 10-8 round in one of those first 2, then you have yourself a recipe for ending up with some draws, which you want to imagine people really be pissed off, is that if we did an immediate rematch after the first fight that Volkanovski won, and then you end up with a draw in the second fight, man, there would be a lot of groans as people start to think about, oh shit, do we have to do this again? So I don't know. I don't know if I can quite talk myself into a 10-8 for Holloway, but you're right that it does seem like that's where you get into the biggest problem with the 10-point must system, is its difficulty in distinguishing between winning by a little and winning by a lot.
Yeah, and man, even if you think Volkanovski rightly won this decision, like the thing that kind of sucks about it so much is that it puts Max Holloway in such a tough spot where like it looked like he was poised to be the young superstar of the featherweight division. You think back just less than 2 years ago, the guy was 20-3. He beats Brian Ortega at UFC 231. Seems like he's really rolling. They decide to have him go up in weight for the interim lightweight title fight against Dustin Poirier at UFC 236. And he loses that one, obviously. You fast forward to today, Max Holloway is 1-3 in his last 4 fights. Of course, now he has the back-to-back losses to Alexander Volkanovski. And it's tough to see a guy with that much promise, and I think a guy that, frankly, we all like a lot, a guy who seems like a very likable individual. It's tough to see him land in this spot where you just look around at the landscape of 145 or the landscape of 155, and it doesn't seem like he has any great immediate options. It's tough to see that happen to Max Holloway in a situation where I think a lot of people think he rightfully won this fight. And like you said, you can't really turn around and do a rematch with Volkanovski here. You have to find something else for Holloway to do. And right now, I'm not at all sure what that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. And maybe the thing for him to do is take a little time to wait and see if something kind of materializes a little bit on its own. Maybe the picture gets a little clearer, and it will, maybe after a few months time, 6 months down the road, maybe it's a little clearer like who he should fight next. But especially, he's 28, I think, right? You see his performance in this fight. There's not a single thing about him that looks washed up or on the decline or anything. It's a really smart fight by him, capable fight. He looks strong throughout the entire fight. He made some good adjustments from the first one to this one. I don't know. It does suck because you look at him and you go, should this guy be forced on the outside of the title picture for as long as Volkanovski holds the title, basically, just because he's got these 2 losses, especially when the second one is that close? It doesn't seem quite fair. And yet it also doesn't seem like, I don't know what else you do with him.
Yeah. And then what about for Volkanovski? Obviously, Triple C is still hanging around in the ether, although technically retired. Volkanovski has said he doesn't know if he's even interested in that matchup. He would like to take on the top contenders at 145 pounds. Zabit Magomedsharipov right now, technically the top contender behind Max Holloway. Of course, Brian Ortega has been out for some time, Chan Sung Jung, Yair Rodriguez, and then Calvin Kattar. So I don't know what the best next matchup is for Alexander Volkanovski. And I really don't know at this point, like, what kind of champion it seems like we can project him to be at this point. Like, for him to come out and beat Max Holloway in their first fight at UFC 245, I think was a big moment for him. Now he gets another win, UFC 251 over Max Holloway, but maybe in somewhat dubious fashion. I don't even know how we are thinking about Alexander Volkanovski moving forward, or what the next best fight for him is.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna need Triple C to either be serious about like coming back here and maybe fighting somebody, or if he wants to keep doing the just talking shit on Twitter thing, okay, but find some way. Maybe if there's some kind of like hashtag that he can include to let us know that he's just talking, that he's just saying stuff, that none of this is meant to be taken as like a real actual desire to get back in the game, get back in there and have some fights, that he just wants to run his mouth off every once in a while on Twitter and see, just for shits and gigs. Chad, find some way to let us know, because otherwise, like, and we need to move on with our lives, like in 2 different divisions, really. So let us handle some business here. If you just want to have some fun and get some attention, fine. But if you're not serious, come on, stop messing around with us.
So you're telling me you wish that there was some manner of recognized slogan,
yes,
for when you are just saying stuff,
right? Or like remember people used to talk about a sarcasm font? I need like a just saying font or something for Henry Cejudo, something that he can apply to these tweets, so maybe we can all enjoy it with you, Henry Cejudo.
If only there was a recurring hashtag that you could use when you were hashtag just saying stuff.
Just saying stuff.
Anyway, that's going to do it for round number 2. We'll be right back with round number 3. All right. You ready to do this?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Ben, it didn't always seem like things were going to be this ugly for Jose Aldo in the bantamweight title fight against Peter Yan at UFC 251. Things started off okay. Jose Aldo was out there doing his stuff. Peter Yan was out there doing his stuff. Jose Aldo even had some nice moments in this fight. But by the time we get midway through the 5th round, Jose Aldo is on the ground, just getting pummeled by Peter Yan. I think a lot of people were sitting there watching their screens, wondering if maybe Jose Aldo owed the referee some money here, or if there was some kind of personal beef, because it sure felt like it took a while for who was this? Leon Roberts?
Leon Roberts.
To step in and stop this thing. Of course, declaring Peter Yan now undisputed bantamweight champion, TKO midway through the 5th round. But for a veteran who comes into this thing on the heels of a loss as like Jose Aldo, and a guy who we frankly weren't sure what to expect from in this fight, this was a tough way to end it.
Yeah, you know how I know it was Leon Roberts as the ref in that fight? Because as we were sitting there watching it, I recall saying, "Where are you, Leon?
Yeah,
Leon, where are you at?
You can go ahead and step in anytime you're ready here.
You seeing this, Leon? Hey, Leon, could you come here for a minute?" Like, yeah, that went on way longer than it needed to, especially because I can see at first where Jose Aldo, he's moving when you tell him you need to see him move. He's showing a little bit of defense, but once he's face down on the mat, just blood pouring onto the canvas, especially, and he's still just getting thumped on. He has nowhere to go. He can't really move from there, and he's not showing any signs of activity. There's no reason for us to keep watching that. And honestly, you mentioned Jose Aldo was competitive in this fight early on. Like he had some moments where he really made Peter Yan work for it, and I think showed that it was by no means absurd for him to be in this fight, even if he's 0-1 as a bantamweight coming into this. He got hurt with a punch to the body early on. I think Dr. Chad Dundas diagnosed him with a broken rib.
Yeah,
right away.
I said it was over. I was like, oh, it's over. Joe Rogan'd it. I jumped to a conclusion there that proved to be premature, although as things played out, it actually was kind of over.
Well, I think that was
another 15 minutes.
That was like the end of the first, right? He came back in the second and the third, and he looked competent and everything. But then by the fourth round, you could see all the damage starting to take a toll. He was wearing down a little bit. And I don't know how much of that was just the damage in this fight and how much of that is the years on the miles on the odometer for Jose Aldo. He's put in a lot of hard years in this sport. And Peter Yan, the younger, fresher guy. And then when he came out for the fifth round and he just got put down almost immediately, okay, it seemed like that was more than just one shot. That was the accumulation that he had dealt with in that fight. And so that made me think, I guess, even sooner that this fight should be stopped, because when he went down there and never really was able to mount any kind of defense there, and just it was a slow, steady thumping from Peter Yan before we finally got this stopped. And it's just, especially, we've seen Jose Aldo live a couple different lives in this sport, and as a revered former champion, and then to watch him just get absolutely beat on unnecessarily, that's an ugly way to finish it there.
Yeah, and once again, it was one of these fights that leaves me feeling like I'm not totally sure what to think about Jose Aldo, because, as you mentioned, the guy's really only 33 years old. He has a lot of miles on the tires in MMA. He's been around forever, and yet you see him out there now on the heels of his third straight loss, and he doesn't look out of place. It doesn't look, for the most part, like he shouldn't be out there against Peter Yan. It didn't look like he was outclassed by Marlon Moraes. Like, obviously that was a very close fight that they had back at UFC 245. And then previous to that, his unanimous decision loss to Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 237, which Volkanovski has turned out to be pretty good, as we've seen. But all told, Aldo has lost 5 of his last 7 fights at this point against really, really tough competition, admittedly. And as a guy who I think you can understand, if you were him, you would think, hey man, I still got it. I'm only 33. I've still got life in this sport. But like, it was tough to watch him go out that way. And as I think back on it now, I'm just not sure. Once again, he's another one of these guys where I just like really have no idea how to even think about where Jose Aldo is at in his career right now.
Yeah. But then again, it feels like we were ready to declare Jose Aldo dead and buried earlier before this, but then, like you said, you see the way he fought in this fight early on, and you go, that's a guy who still beats a whole bunch of bantamweights in the UFC right now. Well, maybe not right now, but 6 months from now, when he has a chance to heal up and get back in there.
Right.
Who knows?
And then on the flip side, Peter Yan, your new 135-pound champion, he's won 10 in a row. He's undefeated in the UFC. He gets this win over Jose Aldo, coming off the head kick KO of Uriah Faber at UFC 245. Just a chronic pain inflictor is Peter Yan to me. He's not going to go out there probably and blow you away in one round. He's just going to consistently do damage to you over the course of a few rounds, and eventually, either win a very lopsided and painful decision, or he will end up stopping you out of a matter of attrition more than anything else. And he's clearly like a fun fighter to watch. He's clearly got some personality to him. But I wonder if he is going to be a difficult men's bantamweight champion for the UFC to promote outside of Russia. He just I think hardcores know who he is and know that know what he's all about. But I don't know what his ceiling is in terms of popularity or in terms of like his ceiling as being a champion.
Well, let's not forget that Aljamain Sterling has publicly said he's coming on that ass.
Yeah.
Pause, as he added afterwards. But that's a fight where that's especially where I need Henry Cejudo to get out of the way and stop making some noise, because Yan versus Aljamain Sterling is the fight to make next. And yeah, I mean, that's not going to be the one that fills up Buffalo Wild Wings during a pandemic, but that is the fight. I think that the hardcores who are actually paying attention to what's going on in men's bantamweight right now, that's the fight to make next. Let's see what you come out of that one with, because I think like that's a tough one to call in a lot of ways. And that is the if the UFC messes around with anything other than that, I'm gonna have words. I'm gonna have words to say about it on this here podcast, Chad Dundas.
Well, that makes me feel good about the future of our show. At least there will be words to be said.
One way or another, I'll probably find some words to say, but I will find some emphatic words to say.
Oh, wow. Emphatic words, even. Well, now I halfway hope they do it.
The emphaticest that you ever heard.
If you're the UFC, though, is that an appetizing title fight to make?
What else are you going to do? What else can you do at 135?
Triple C that money? Offer them the money?
But then, I don't know. I guess it's like, do you really think that it's a matter of offering Triple C money and he comes back and he's like, okay, I'm back and I'm back in this life. I'm back in this career. Or is he just looking for one fight that he can come back and make money off of? Because it doesn't help you if he's just going to come back and do one fight.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting fight. Like with Peter Yan ensconced as your champion there, though, like you just look around that division and you know, Marlon Moraes, Cody Garbs being back. There are some interesting potential fights down the road, I think, for Peter Yan, if he can get by Aljamain Sterling, which might be the biggest trick of all to jumpstart that title reign.
I want to read the question we can get to from listener mail, because it is about Peter Yan, and I think it deserves to be said, from Mr. Burrito Bowl. What was your favorite non-MMA moment of UFC 251? Mine was when Peter Yan kept doing his own hype whistling. About as wholesome as it gets. I mean, he may as well have been yelling, "Yay, Peter!" Great stuff.
Yeah,
I agree. After
agree
like in celebrating, he's doing the whistling thing. You can see him like where he does, like he like can like bite down a lip and do this kind of like celebratory whistling. And it took me a moment to realize, like, wait, is that whistling? That whistling's coming from him. Like he's the one doing his own whistling for that.
Whistling for
all right.
himself.
Yay, Peter.
I agree. It was something to behold.
Yeah.
Peter Yan. All right, let's do just saying stuff, and then we'll get out of here for this week, Ben. This week, I'm just saying, man, I guess Fight Island is what we thought it was, and that is not really a thing. Just like the UFC showed up, they had a nice little promo package about Fight Island, but once you get into the actual event, it just seemed like a UFC event that could have been in Dayton, could have been in Tampa, could have been in Orange County, could have been a UFC event out there in Hong Kong. Just, I guess it's both the strength and the weakness of the UFC event that you always know what you're going to get, and it's always going to be the same thing. But when you make a big deal about how you're going to have Fight Island and you get everybody's hopes up about it, and then it just shows up and you're just doing your events in a dark Quonset hut on Yas Island. It is what we thought it was. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Octagon on the beach, though, Chad.
Yeah, I guarantee no one ever got in that octagon. It's like,
no,
what,
they didn't. They got in there just long enough to take the picture for Instagram, and then they got the hell out of there.
Yeah, because it's like 108 degrees out on the canvas out there.
Yes. Yeah, okay. This week, my just saying stuff, I don't know if you caught this at the post-fight press conference. You know, Joe Rogan had made a comment that he thinks that the UFC ought to do away with the show win bonus structure.
Right.
Just because, you know, you don't incentivize people at that level to win. They always want to win. They're always trying their hardest. And to get screwed by the judges or any of the other number of things that can screw you out of your win money and go home with half your pay really sucks, especially when they're not making that much to begin with. Dana White was asked at the post-fight press conference if he's ever thought about just doing away with the win money part of the contract structure. He replied, Chad, he'd never thought about it until this guy brought it up right now.
Really? He's never thought about it before? It's the only way to do contracts.
Yep. Only way it can be done. I guess I'm just saying, in a weird way, I almost believe him. And then I almost believe he has never truly considered it until somebody with the negotiating clout comes along and makes him consider it. And then, of course, we do see them on guaranteed payout purses that don't have a win bonus. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Anyway, that is going to do it for this week's co-main event podcast. Remember, on Wednesday, we've got the live chat over on Patreon, as well as a new episode of the Movie Club, although we do have a programming note coming up for Friday's Power Hour. You're going to be out of town.
That's right, going camping.
So there won't be a Power Hour this week, but we will be back 1 week from today, of course, to fire up all the stuff we normally do. Another full week of the co-main event podcast proper, as well as Patreon content. So check us out with that. If you're not a member of the Patreon yet, head over to patreon.com/co-main event and sign up over there to support us, keep the discourse unfettered, and take advantage of all the fun stuff we've got going on. As for right now, though, we are done. We are through. We are out.
You're not even going to mention my my Jorge Masvidal Street Jesus shirt, huh?
Oh, I was trying to figure out what it was earlier, but now I see what it is.
Chris Rainey special.
Yeah, it's a celebratory, some celebratory attire there.
Happier times.
Happier times. You know? That's right.
Yeah.
All right, let me see.